The world economy no longer needs Russia. For most of the last year, especially after he invaded Ukraine in February, Russian President Vladimir Putin has indeed been riding the wave of his alleged energy supremacy, keeping the world economy captive to his wishes. Since last summer, Putin has cut off natural gas exports to Europe, believing that freezing and without warmth over the wintertime might flip on their governments, making further solidarity for Ukraine exceedingly difficult. Putin's flawed economic gambles add to a growing litany of misjudgments, ranging from underestimating the Ukrainian people to minimizing the West's combined unity and drive. In this video, we will tell you why experts are imagining a world economy without Russia as a reaction to Russia's decision to turn its energy supply into an economic weapon. Before we get into it, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. We will cover some important and controversial topics on this channel, and your support will really help us with the algorithm. The danger was substantial. In 2021, Russia supplied 83% of its gas to Europe. Russia's total worldwide shipments of 7 million barrels of oil per day and 200 billion cubic meters of piped gas per year contributed to about 50% of the country's federal earnings. Even more crucially, Russia's commodity sales were critical in global supply chains. Europe relied on Russia for 46% of its entire gas supply, with equal degrees of reliance on other Russian items such as metals and fertilizer. In the short run, Putin has undoubtedly caused economic harm to European Union member nations. However, Russia will not be able to win this energy battle in the long run. Putin's move would only hasten the downfall of his country's energy sector and hasten the country's loss of its prized reputation as a global energy leader. In addition to Russia's energy sector crisis, the ruble has collapsed and the fear of inflation has grown. Russia's interest rate was 20% just before the conflict. The central bank reduced interest rates during 2022 until stopping in October as inflationary fears mounted. The ruble is expected to decline further in 2023. The cost of war is rising. Also, the Russian government says that industrial production did not fall in 2022, but this is due to increased armament production and military expenditure factoring into those figures. Automobile output has nearly been cut in half. The GDP has dropped by 0.5% since 300,000 people aged 22 to 50 were lured into the conflict. According to reports, 500,000 to 1 million individuals fled Russia after the conflict started, implying that the loss of labor and intellectual property will entail a significant long-term effect. Russians are bearing political accountability for Putin's inability to end the war by being penalized with economic stagnation. Europe is making it hard for Russia to maintain its oil supremacy. Moscow's blackmail has finally persuaded EU nations that Moscow is not a trustworthy energy source. As a consequence, Europe is ramping up its attempts to wean itself from Russian hydrocarbons, with liquefied natural gas, or LNG, infrastructure being developed at breakneck speed to increase imports from the United States, Australia, and Qatar. The first of several new LNG terminals will open shortly in Estonia, Latvia, and Finland. At the same time, additional gas contracts are being negotiated to increase supply, such as from Algeria or Norway. The EU is also speeding up efforts to establish sources of renewable energy. Far from dying of cold, Europe swiftly arranged alternate gas sources by shifting its focus to global LNG. This would involve an estimated 55 billion cubic meters from the United States, 2.5 times larger than pre-war US LNG shipments to Europe. When combined with advances in renewable, nuclear, and coal resources, these options have decreased Europe's reliance on Russian gas to 9% of total gas imports. Moreover, Europe's unusually warmer winter implies that not only have the scariest situations been prevented, but Europe's massive storage tanks have just been depleted and can continue over into the following winter. Actually, from 2016 to 2021, Europeans used 17.5% of their prepaid gas over a month and a half in the winter. As reported by the Wilson Center in the United States, the amount of gas consumed in the first winter following the war was reduced by 12.5%. Germany's storage tanks were 91% filled in January, up from 54% the previous year, implying that Europe will require importing much less gas in 2023. Germany historically received over half of its gas and more than a third of its oil from Russia. However, Russia shut off the country's gas supply in August, while Germany suspended Russian oil imports at the beginning of the year. To discover other energy sources, Germany has reopened coal-fired power facilities, postponed plans to close its 3 existing nuclear power reactors, and moved to enhance infrastructure to stockpile natural gas purchased from other nations such as Norway and the United States. Germany's finance minister, Christian Lindner, claimed at the World Economic Forum, WEF, in Davos, Switzerland, that a new liquefied natural gas facility in Germany had been completed in a record time of roughly 8 months. He also stated that further infrastructure projects were in the works. Europe is moving much closer towards green energy. The effects are enormous. Europe is currently guaranteed an adequate energy supply until 2024, giving lots of time for other affordable energy sources to be completely integrated and operational inside Europe. This will help entirely and completely substitute exports of gas from Russia. It appears Europe will no longer require Russian oil and gas within a few years. Not only Europe, other economies are in the game. The days of internationally priced energy due to Russia-driven supply squeezes are long gone. Aside from Europe's lower-than-expected demand for LNG, China is moving further away from global LNG and towards local sources. Combined with fast-expanding LNG supplies, it's no wonder the gas futures market is currently pricing gas to be inexpensive compared to pre-war prices for the foreseeable future. In fact, Russia is increasingly finding itself in a weak position in the oil market. India, China, and Turkey purchased Russian oil that historically would have gone to Europe. Nevertheless, these economies purchased the oil at a substantially lower cost than Brent crude, with a price differential of more than $30 per barrel. Russia's oil price is reported to be $50 per barrel, whereas it is actually selling at roughly $38, or half the price of Brent crude oil. Putin, on the contrary, has no lasting power and no option to restore his former principal client. He is discovering the old-fashioned way that it is far simpler for consumers to change untrustworthy commodities providers than it is for providers to seek new destinations. Putin's oil influence is also dwindling. Long forgotten are the times when the concern of Putin withdrawing Russian oil resources drove oil prices to rise by 40% in 2 weeks. In reality, after implementing the G7 oil price limit, Putin suspended oil shipments to nations that adopted the price cap beginning February 1st, and oil prices fell. Why is it the case? It is clear that the world no longer relies on Russia's oil. The oil market is tilting towards purchasers rather than vendors, owing to increased supply, more than sufficient to counterbalance potential cutbacks in Russian crude output. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak informed Russian media that the government was willing to limit oil output in 2023. Oil prices are currently lower than before the conflict, and production from suppliers such as the United States, Venezuela, Canada, and Brazil increased by 4 million barrels per day in the second half of 2022. With much more additional supply on the way this year, any Russian crude that is depleted will be smoothly and readily replenished within weeks. Russia's leverage has also dwindled since the G7 price ceiling forced it to make a lose-lose decision that eroded its energy advantage. Without openly engaging in the cap, China and India are using it to push a stiff deal with Russia, with discounts of up to 50%, so that although India is purchasing 33 times more Russian oil than a year ago, Russia is not creating expected earnings based on the $44 break-even production costs, plus higher shipping costs. However, if Putin lowers output much more, as he has warned, he would lose any significant oil market dominance in an enormously oversupplied oil market and significantly reduce his earnings at a time when he is clearly in need of cash. The low output implies that due to sanctions, Russian energy industries no longer have access to Western capital and technology. This is an imminent danger to the Russian economy. Their present energy supplies are dwindling fast, and while they have new areas in the Arctic, developing them would take massive sums of money and cutting-edge Western technology. Without access to either, Russia's energy production will gradually decline over the next few decades. The oil market is not an exception. Russia's other commodities are also depleted. The plan to militarize foodstuffs imploded when even putative supporters rebelled against Russia. Furthermore, in particular, metals markets that Russia has traditionally controlled, such as nickel, palladium, and titanium, blackmail-averse customers and increased prices have accelerated and re-energized inactive public and private development of vital mineral supply chain and mining activities. These are mainly in North and South America and Africa, where there are numerous untapped mineral deposits. In reality, in some critical metal sectors, such as cobalt and nickel, the aggregate production of additional mines set to start within the following 2 years would provide more than sufficient supply to substitute Russian metals in international supply chains completely. Conclusion: Russia's downfall continues, Russians are adjusting to the realities of economic isolation, and the rest of the globe realizes that an economy without Russia is feasible. Actually, what counts is that the end is approaching. Putin would never be able to generate such global economic instability and disruption anymore, since he has irrevocably damaged Russia's strongest hand, namely energy and commodities, beyond restoration. The conflict on the battlefield is still ongoing, but success is within reach on the economic battlefield. The traditional paths to economic recovery, including raising exports, growing local manufacturing, and obtaining more foreign investment, are no longer realistic. Other recommended measures, such as price restrictions or fixed exchange rates, would exacerbate the situation. Did you find this video interesting? If so, remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.